Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Keeping Up With Conspicuous. We are a little bit delayed with this one because apparently I was teething and wisdom teeth caused you a little bit of grief. So that wouldn't have been fun last Thursday to film. So we apologise about the delay. But the lovely Dave has been so accommodating and managed to move to today. So thank you so much, Dave, for coming on. Excited to have a little chit chat.
Yes, I am. Thank you for having me.
No worries. So we know, obviously, from your title on the screen that you're a director of Microsoft Business Applications, and you're currently working for Zensar. But for people that don't know about you and your history, I know you might have a few familiar faces in watching you because you get out there and you do lots of chats. So this is second nature to Dave, hopefully. But how, where have you come from and what is it that you do?
Yep, of course. So at the moment, I am the Director of Business Applications, as you said, for Zensar. So I'm responsible primarily for the EMEA region, but also for the global side of the practice. So I'm looking at growing the practice within Zensar. For those that don't know Zensar, they're primarily a Salesforce and Oracle SAP partner, but they're now looking to kind of expand their offering into the Microsoft Business Application space. So I've been brought in to help to grow that side of the business. So a very challenging role, but very rewarding. So I'm definitely enjoying it. In terms of background, a lot of people may know me, they may not. I have been involved in the Microsoft ecosystem for, I was trying to work this out, it's between 18 and 19 years.
Oh, wow.
Probably didn't enter it in the way that a lot of people have. I didn't start off in a technical role. I was sales for a while, and kind of fell into the technical side of the application space. So it was kind of, I started doing sales before even Dynamics. So I was selling operational support systems and business support systems to big telecoms. So primarily working with Oracle platforms. Got a client that wanted to get into the Microsoft space and decided to sell Dynamics. So I actually started selling Dynamics when it was version 3. So yes, a very long time ago. And through that, I ended up working with a Glasgow-based partner who didn't bring me on initially to sell Dynamics as a kind of software as a service. They were building an application, a marketing automation solution on top of Dynamics, and selling it as a marketing automation system. What they quickly found out was that anyone that wanted to talk about marketing automation actually wanted a CRM system as well, which led that partner into their Microsoft journey. And through that, I started building demos, and that's how I kind of fell into that technical space. So not your traditional techie background. More of a sales business background. But fell into the technical side of it entirely by accident. Never ever planned on selling Dynamics or even been involved in the Microsoft space. It just sort of happened.
I think it's nice when that organic journey sort of happens. And, I think selling the product is really hard because you do have to know a lot about the product. So that must have given you a little bit of a head start going into that technical side. And then did you when you went into the technical side of Dynamics, did you start as like a consultant or analyst, or where did that journey begin in role?
Again, a more interesting journey than that. So because the partner I was working with at the time was quite small, they started off in a different technology. It was very small, so I wore many hats, I guess. So I was doing everything from sales to BA to analyst to consultant to architect. So it was very much a jack of all trades. My only exception really was where I didn't get involved was pure development. We were lucky enough to have a developer.
Oh, okay, that's fair enough. I mean, yeah, sometimes it's hard wearing all those hats, but you get a good taste for absolutely everything. And did you find you liked one area more than others, or?
I definitely enjoyed engaging more with the business, more from a strategy leadership level. which meant architecture fitted my style of work much better, because it meant I could really work with the business in defining what their solution was and helping them ultimately solve problems.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I know a lot of people always sort of aim to get to that point, and there's always questions around what's the right way to grow within the Dynamics ecosystem and what's the right pathways, etc. And I know this is sort of an area we wanted to address. Obviously, as I just dropped my water, sorry, playing the carpet everywhere. But with growing in a career, obviously as a recruiter, I see quite a few people approach and say, well, I'm a consultant, but I'm basically an architect. I want to go into an architect role now. And sometimes it's not as easy as that. But I know you have some quite good advice, don't you, about how to progress up the ladder?
Yep. So certainly from my experience in my journey, it's not my technical skills that have advanced me in my career. It's definitely been much more around people and business skills. What I found was, even back when I was doing recruitment for like additional analysts and developers, etc., it was always better, I found, to get people with a strong business knowledge and understanding, people who could really talk to customers and understand their problems and their pain points. Because ultimately it's much, again, fairly anecdotal in terms of my experience, but I found it much easier to learn technical skills rather than learn business skills. And I think it's one of those things, you can teach someone how to do things technically. It's much harder to teach somebody people skills and business skills, because a lot of times it's just your personality. You can either, it comes easier to some people than it does to others.
Absolutely. I know a lot of people touch on the soft skill side. And I know sometimes in the tech sector, there can be a mix of personalities, but is it, I know they're harder to learn, but do you think it's a case of those people that succeed are the people that maybe have those traits a little bit more innate rather than being learnt? Or I know that's quite a tough question, but...
No, I wouldn't say it's necessarily purely down to trait. I mean, you have to have the willingness to learn to do it. What I find is that you can get further with clients if you have strong interpersonal skills. So, for example, I'm quite happy to say to a client, depending on obviously what we're trying to solve and what the problem is, that I don't know the answer and that I will need to go and find the answer for you. What I quite often find where it's someone that doesn't necessarily have the confidence to say that, and again, it tends to be when it's a really technical problem, you will find that developers are people who are much more technical minded than kind of soft skill minded. They struggle sometimes to say, I don't know, and they'll try to come up with an answer on the spot, rightly or wrongly. Whereas I would much rather say to the client, look, I don't know the answer. I need to go and do some research. I need to go and speak to someone that's got maybe the technical knowledge to give me an answer, or at least help me work through what the answer is. So I think that's where it's really kind of helped me, that I am, again, coming from that kind of sales soft skill background. I'm much more confident in my ability to say, actually, do you know what? I don't know the answer to that. I need to go and find out.
Absolutely. I mean, it definitely makes the future issues go away if you just say there and then. Otherwise, they just build up and become a bigger problem if you don't address it there and then.
That's it. If I say I don't know now and I need to go and do my research, that's a much easier conversation to then go back to the customer or the client and say, okay, I've went and found out. Here is a thought through, measured answer to the problem, as opposed to giving them perhaps, I mean, don't get me wrong, every now and again, I mean, the clock kind of tells the time right twice in the day. So you might get the answer, but it does open you up to a much more riskier conversation of, actually, I was wrong. And again, that's an even harder thing to say to a client than I don't know in the first place.
Yeah, it's hard, but it does build that trust and that rapport with clients. And that's obviously your biggest thing because you want repeat business. You want them to be able to trust you and come back. So it's hard, but as you said, like the main thing is having that confidence just to own up to stuff and be honest. And I think confidence is such a big thing nowadays as well. As we know, I would say the dynamics industry is quite competitive. Um, and I don't know if you've got any advice, but I know a lot of people obviously, if I'm asking people why they're looking for a new job and they say to me, that, there's a lack of progression in the company. Do we think it's a case of people maybe not having the confidence to ask, you know, what's my next steps? How can I get there? Or do you feel nowadays it is just because it's so highly competitive? And how do we, what skills or what way can you approach that nowadays, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably a combination of both. I'm
Yeah.
kind of a big believer in people aren't just going to hand you things. So if you want progression, you have to go after it. And yeah, it is a very competitive market in the dynamic space. And if we focus particularly on the UK as an example, it's also a very small market.
Yeah.
Um, so even though you've maybe only been in the job for a short amount of time, people still might know who you are, not just at your own company, but at other companies. Because as we know, it is quite small, and which inherently makes it incestuous to a point.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, I still talk to lots of colleagues that I've worked with at previous partners who have now gone to other partners. They've then moved to back to the same partner. Yeah, it is quite a small market, and you do get to know people. So what I kind of recommend to people who are looking to make that next step, whether that be in a technical role or a non-technical role, is put yourself out there, take on challenging work that's maybe not entirely within your remit, put yourself forward, volunteer for it, because people will get to know you for the good and the bad, I guess, that you do.
Yeah.
So yeah, just always kind of put yourself forward, do the best job you can, and yeah, what people will see that effort you put in. And yeah, as I say, it might be someone you've worked with in the past. It might be someone that you've worked with in a completely different role in a previous company that then moves to that place that gives you that opportunity to move to that next step in your career, whether that's internally in the partner you're in or the job you're in, or externally to another partner.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, you definitely hit the nail on the head that everyone does end up knowing everyone, and you have to put yourself forwards and get, a lot of people go on about mentorship nowadays as well, and I think that that's really key. And just being able to have that push to be like, yeah, let's put myself forwards, let's try this. You're not going to be perfect all the time, but that's the way you sort of learn and grow. And I know it's quite cliche to say, but it's true, and I think it's good to readdress that. Now, with dynamics, we know the complexity of the IT ecosystem is continually growing. It never stops. We've got so many new things coming in, upgrades, it's always going on. But I think one thing that is quite key at the moment is businesses are now learning to adopt the full ecosystem, and a lot more people are able to sort of help businesses open their eyes to that. So what are your views on that? I know maybe from a sales background, seeing where it used to be back in the day and how it maybe is now in terms of that. Has it changed quite a lot?
I would say more, not necessarily how businesses are approaching it, more how I guess partners are approaching it in terms of engaging with businesses. Certainly back when it was version 3, version 4, even 2011 to an extent, people were still very much in that let's sell functionality and features.
Yeah.
So I think that was part of the adoption problem back then, was that people were trying to work out how to shoehorn functionality and features into businesses, as opposed to how does the features and functionality solve business problems. And that's certainly from my kind of approach. It's more about how do we solve your problem? Is it through Dynamics? Because it might not be. So it's again being that kind of open, honest, transparent with clients on, yes, Microsoft probably will be able to solve some of your problems, but let's understand what the problems are first of all, rather than just trying to push functionality and features.
Interesting. Because I definitely feel there's still like a split in the industry of people that just love Microsoft and Microsoft products and Dynamics and still sort of just want that for other businesses. But I feel like the shift is now coming to a little bit more of a, I guess, like a holistic or enterprise mindset as such, would you say?
Yeah, I would have to agree. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm probably slightly biased in terms of my background with Microsoft. Microsoft are obviously the best. But
Yeah.
in all seriousness, particularly now that I'm working with Center, who do have capability to deliver Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, and a whole range of other technology, I do see more often where there's maybe organizations that are using a Dynamics F&O or a Dynamics BC as an ERP system, but then using Salesforce as their CRM system, because that combination solves their particular set of problems. Whereas, don't get me wrong, Dynamics CRM and Dynamics F&O or BC might be able to solve that problem, but for whatever reason, perhaps that Salesforce has been a better fit out of the box. So there's been less customization, less work, less overhead to get to that particular combination. And again, it's all about finding that best combination of products, be it entirely Microsoft or Microsoft and another provider. It's more about how do we most effectively and efficiently solve the problem for the customer.
Definitely. And I think it is becoming a lot more of a customer centered approach. I know, it always has been about the customers, but as you said, maybe functionality has always come a little bit above that before thinking of the client's needs. And nowadays, I think a lot more people are looking at it from that perspective as well, which obviously in turn, if you're helping the business as best as you can, then it's a full circle moment and everyone's happy, and that's
Yeah.
how it should be. And
No,
I
absolutely. I
know,
think Microsoft is certainly adopting that mindset more as well. Because I mean, if you look at the trends over the last few years, with the moves they made around the kind of common data model and how they're aligning with Oracle and Salesforce so that you can more easily integrate Salesforce to a Dynamics backend or Dynamics to a Salesforce backend or to an Oracle ERP. Because I think what the big suppliers were realizing was that by not allowing customers to choose their combination of products, they were forcing customers down perhaps a route that wasn't favourable to them, in terms of they would look at which single product had the biggest impact and then adopt all the rest of the products from that particular provider, even though they maybe weren't necessarily the right products for that particular problem they were trying to solve. So they were forcing people into well, if Salesforce is our best CRM platform, actually let's go and look at Oracle because there's closer ties, versus I can choose Salesforce as my CRM, but I do have the option now to choose F&O or BC as my backend because they now more seamlessly integrate and connect, which I think was a positive move for everyone involved.
absolutely. And you're hearing it a lot more. Like even when I was at, what conference was it? I can't remember what conference it was, but we were sat there and they were talking about all the new releases and stuff. And every single new release was talking about how it can be seamlessly integrated with da 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 da. And like I think that was the first time I really paid attention to that and noticed. Obviously, I'm from an outsider's perspective. So yeah, really interesting. And then with, I know there's been like a lot of talk about the SaaS debate as well. So I don't know if I'm going to say her name right, but is it Satya Nadella's SaaS is
Satya
dead?
Nadella, Satya Nadella, so the chief exec of Microsoft,
There we go.
did an interview a couple of months ago where he said SaaS is dead. I
Right.
don't think SaaS is dead in any way, shape, or form. I think that comment has been kind of misquoted a few times. I think what he actually meant by the comment was SaaS as we know it is dead. Because ultimately, if you just adopt Copilot, being obviously the big push for Microsoft at the moment around kind of their AI revolution, AI and Copilot is a SaaS product.
Yeah.
So I think what it actually meant was the way that we work with SaaS is dead, because that kind of prompted a lot of posts on LinkedIn saying that nobody's going to buy CRM, no one's going to buy BC, no one's going to buy F&O. But actually, I think there's still a need for all of those applications. I think it's just going to be the way that we interact with those products are going to be slightly different. Because ultimately, whether you're using Copilot or you're using a Microsoft Forms in kind of interface or a Power Platform interface, there still is the need for that back-end data to ultimately support all of these. Because if your data isn't there, your Copilot or your AI tool isn't going to be particularly useful, because it's only as good as the data behind it. So there's always going to be a need for that structured format in the sense of a CRM system or a financial system or an ERP system to sit behind it. But it just opens up more options in terms of how we engage with those systems. So now, rather than typing the person's name in the first name box, their last name in the last name box, you can now use Copilot to say, create me a contact for Dave. So it gives you that
Right.
option to engage with it differently. But I think there will still be a need for a more traditional CRM system. Because again, like adoption, I think AI obviously is getting adopted, but there is going to be a slow kind of process in that, the same way that when we saw CRM systems for the first time, getting people off of spreadsheets, people are still using spreadsheets.
I'm guilty.
Exactly. So I mean, how many years has CRM been around? Even just looking at Microsoft, it's been around 20 years now, and there's still people sitting with Excel spreadsheets, and that's their CRM system. Or sorry, CRM system.
Yeah, well, some people are just really reluctant to change. And you never know what type of business you're going to approach that either is or isn't reluctant. But yeah, it's interesting how you say it's sort of the way you're going to approach and interact with it. So yeah, as you said, there was a bit of a uproar on LinkedIn of people having different comments on how it was sort of phrased, maybe. But it is interesting, like how, yeah, I don't know. Obviously, I'm a user of Dynamics, and I'm starting to see all this. I hear it sort of in the hustle and bustle of conferences and speaking to people like yourself on the podcast. But and then it's right, like on our CRM system, our Dynamic CRM system, you now have the option of Copilot popping up here, there, and everywhere. So yeah, I guess it does change the way you interact with it. So maybe that's a good way to look at it. But it's good to discuss that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think agentic AI is probably the next kind of, well, I mean, it's the current big step.
Yeah.
So I think that, again, that's where I say I think it will change how we interact with CRM. I think a lot of the kind of monotonous tasks of data entry, of data capture, of scoring leads, making sure that they're routed to the right place. I think a lot of that functionality will now be replaced by agentic AI, so it will just happen for you. But ultimately, that's a good thing, because ultimately then it takes away those resource intensive tasks to give you more space to think and work and actually work out, how do I engage with my customers better, person to person, by taking away those kind of data tasks. So I think we'll see a lot more automation being baked into Dynamics. And as I say, it's just going to change the way we engage with it, but there will still be a need for it. Because I say, whether we're getting the data directly from Dynamics or whether we're asking Copilot to go and do a summary of the data for us, we still need to make sure that that data is in a good enough quality and a good enough structure, because it's ultimately, if you put rubbish in, you're going to get rubbish out.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the underlying thing is obviously it's trying to increase the productivity so you can focus on the more important tasks. I know we have like little AI meetings. I think it's every other week as a company because there's so much to learn. And we heard agentic agents, and we were like, what the hell is that? And you have to sit down as a company and be like, right, is it going to be beneficial? Like, how would we even go about using it or understanding it properly? And as a user, there's a lot to take on. So having people like yourself being able to actually explain it when it comes around is going to be very, very handy. But there is just so much coming out. But I think from talks, it's all going to be very exciting and positive. I know people are still
Yeah.
reluctant, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't think adoption's necessarily the problem. I think people have been engaging with AI, albeit probably unknowingly, for a long time now, because large language models and AI, or what people class as AI, isn't a new thing. I mean, Siri. How many people use Siri or Alexa, and that is effectively an AI model that converts your voice into a string that then goes and queries a set of data and responds with an answer. So people have been engaging with it and adopting it for a long time. I think the struggle that people are going to have adopting it into their own businesses is going to be around data quality, is one of them from a technical point of view, and more from a business point of view is just understanding actually where it can add value into your business, because that's it. The conversations I've been having with people, that's people's biggest question is, how does it fit into my business and where can it provide those productivity and efficiency gains? A lot of people are just struggling to identify their own use cases.
absolutely. Yeah, I know it is such a big topic, and I think everyone that I've sort of spoken to from the IT perspective has had very similar views in terms of how it's going to be, etc. And we're just going to have to ride the wave and see how it all goes. But I think it definitely, yeah, as you said, it's going to be unknowingly from a user's perspective that you might not even know you're going to have agentic agents in the background or whatever it may be. Now, obviously, I know with Dynamics, we sort of touched upon it, especially in the UK market, is a very competitive market. So it is quite saturated in the UK. A lot of people want to do it. A lot of people know Microsoft is a big talk, and there is so many good things going on that they want to push into that market. Obviously, you've got a lot of knowledge. You're currently a director of Microsoft Business Applications. I can't talk today. I'm going to blame it on the tooth. It's not anyone's tooth, but I can't get my words out. But Microsoft Business Applications. So what would you say about like what the challenges are of going into that market currently?
Yeah, I mean, it is very saturated. Particularly, yeah, I say certainly from my experience, the UK market is saturated in terms of, it's a difficult one because there's a lot of partners who do Microsoft Dynamics. There's a
Yeah.
lot of people who do Microsoft Dynamics, but certainly maybe the last year being slightly an exception. It seems to be a slightly different year last year, but generally there's more projects and more people wanting to do and use Dynamics than there is people to deliver it. So certainly the big challenge I think that we're going to see now that I've started to see the market pick up again, I think it's going to be a resource challenge in finding the right people to deliver projects into clients. So I think there's going to be a big spike in the number of contractors that appear over the next kind of 6 to probably 18 months as these projects kick off. But I think there's also going to be a big push from partners as well in terms of recruiting, not necessarily senior resources, but starting to kind of nurture that lower level, bringing people in as analysts, consultants to help grow that pool. Because ultimately the senior resources come from that pool of consultants and kind of functional business analysts. So without nurturing that pool at the bottom end, you're going to struggle to then find enough people at the top end as well.
It's refreshing to hear that from your point of view, actually. And one, I think if any contractors are listening, they're going to be cheering and hoping this is the case. Because I know it was super hard last year. But I think the fact that you've touched upon that, hopefully the pond of, you know, new people coming into it, from an analyst perspective, etc. I think, well, it's music to my ears, and I've been hoping for this to happen because, as you said last year, from a resourcing perspective, because the projects were a little bit on the lower side and, you know, not as high frequency, it was a tough year for a lot of businesses. It was always just senior people that they wanted to bring in that could just get the job done. That's what they needed. Um, and I do think this year there is going to be a big shift in what that resourcing is going to look like.
Yeah.
I hope.
I hope so. Because it wasn't that the projects weren't there last year. People just weren't moving on them. Because
Yeah.
ultimately the projects were there. I knew a lot of organisations that had projects planned but then delayed them. A lot of it down to, I mean, it was an election year, so a lot of people were holding off to see what happened in the economy in terms of the new government coming in. So I think there was quite a few factors hitting last year in terms of the kind of people kicking off projects, not just within the dynamic space, within all kind of tech spaces, because it wasn't just dynamics that was down in terms of recruitment. I did see a shift in Salesforce, SAP, Oracle, all the kind of tech players. That kind of accumulated with quite a lot of layoffs from some of the bigger organizations. So it meant, again, the numbers of people in the market, I think, were higher as well. So a combination of lower projects getting started, higher number of people in the market. It just wasn't a particularly great year for tech in general. But yeah, even just, I mean, we're just getting into the start of February at the moment, and I've certainly seen a much bigger uplift compared to this time last year in the number of people that are willing to move on IT projects. So hopefully it does continue on that trajectory this year.
Fingers crossed. I mean, you've definitely just explained that way better than I put it. So yeah, obviously, I think this year I'm hoping that does continue. I know there's a little bit of candidate reluctancy because they're unsure how stable the market is and they're just sort of waiting to see how it pans out. So I know a lot of people are wanting to stick at the moment. So whether the candidates are out there, I think they will, and there will be a lot more willing once we get another month under our belt that continues to be going this way, hopefully. So fingers crossed. But I know if anyone is watching that has had any questions regarding what we've spoken about, please do pop them in the comments and we can get back to them after the live. But Dave, and you know, it's really refreshing to hear your perspective on such big topics nowadays. And I think just being able to address these questions that come up quite a lot, to be honest, within the industry has been really beneficial. So I don't know whether you've got any sort of final thoughts that you want to wrap up on.
Yeah, I've got a takeaway from this, and it's certainly what's kind of helped me is within the Microsoft space in particular. Don't stop learning. The market is moving so fast, the products are moving so fast, the technology is moving so fast that if you stop learning, you will be left behind. So although you're aspiring to get into that solution architect role, enterprise architect, director, whatever it may be, your learning journey shouldn't stop, because as soon as you've learned something, it will be pretty much out of date. So you need to keep on top of that and make sure that you are constantly learning and learning as much as you can. Because yeah, as I said, the product moves so fast that it's impossible for any one person to keep up with it all. So certainly just try to stay on top and learn as much as you can. And things like this, things like the community events, are a good way of doing that, because they at least provide you kind of summaries of these are the key things that other people have found, and it will hopefully drive some of your thoughts around what you should be learning next.
Absolutely. Well, no, that was a perfect last thought. So Thank you for that. And I know we always finish on the last question. I don't know whether you have come across it yet, but the question is, if you were not Director of Microsoft Business Applications, we said it without stumbling there, and not in the tech space, what would your job be, do you reckon?
I mean, I quite like traveling. So
Nice.
because I mean, not so much anymore, but I used to travel a lot within my job in the Microsoft space to visit clients, etc. But I would quite like a job where I get to travel for me. So maybe something like a travel journalist, travel, yeah, something involving travel and being able to see the world.
Easy. No, I like that one. I definitely agree. I feel like maybe that would be my answer. Not that I managed to get many places just yet, but maybe one day.
In the future.
In the future at some point. But yeah, Dave, honestly, thank you so much. Once again, thank you for being flexible and rescheduling to today.
No, you're very
So
welcome.
last minute, really appreciate it. And two, just thank you for bringing your great insights. And for everyone watching, we will see everyone next week. No, Thursday now, because we're Tuesday. So we'll see everyone Thursday, resuming as normal. And yes, have a lovely day, Dave, and
Yep,
we will
you too.
catch up soon.
Thank you very much.
No worries.
Thank you.
Don't know whether Helena